Was don't miss.
First thing I would say is that if you're dealing with someone who's depressed and they're really depressed, you should try giving them antidepressants. Because
First opening statement. One thing I will say, my stance on taking antidepressants is that you should not take them. I believe that there's more that you can find out about yourself by going through the suffering by pure will and the knowledge that you can fix yourself without any external input. But of course, this is a personal opinion. I'm not saying that it is the right thing to do. Just based off of experience, going through some certain bouts of depression myself, I figure that I appreciate myself more because I managed to take control of the aspects that I thought I had no control over, started to control the things that I can control, such as my diet, training, my sleeping pattern, and things of that sort that sort of helped place the building blocks into place to build a better version of myself. So my stance on antidepressants is that you should not take them. But of course, I am not a professional. I'm speaking from a life standpoint and a journey of fully building yourself back up.
Because if they die, you can't help them. Okay, so if you're...
And what he said there is absolutely true. If you can offer them a lifeline, then by all means, if it is antidepressants and that is the best that you can do for them, then by all means, so be it. But I believe that they should be presented with alternatives before presenting the antidepressants. But as he mentioned, you cannot save them from depression if they die. So on that statement alone, it was enough to sway my opinion on my stance of antidepressants.
Suffering, you are obligated, in a sense, to hold on to whatever rope someone throws you. And one of the things I do with my clients all the time, especially if they're really in trouble, is to tell them, look, I don't know exactly what's going to help you, but don't arbitrarily throw out any possibilities because you might not have that luxury. Antidepressants help a lot of people, and there are technical reasons why that's the case. So that's a simple answer. It's not relevant to what I already described, except that if you're offered a gift by your society and it works, try it. I don't care what your presuppositions are. Apart from that, lots of the time you see people who are suffering with depression, for example. There's a multitude of reasons, but I'll take one common reason. You could think about it as associated with the story of Peter Pan. Now, Peter Pan is someone who won't grow up, right? Now, the problem with Peter Pan is he gets to be king, but it's king of Neverland. Neverland doesn't exist. So being king of nothing isn't that helpful. Well, one of the things that you often see with people who suffer from depression...
I wanted to be like Peter Pan. Just ruin the whole cartoon. Go ahead, Jordan. I'm joking.
Depression, and I'm not making a blanket statement about the cause of depression because there's lots of them, is that people who don't have enough order in their life tend to get overwhelmed. So for example, if someone comes into me and to see me and they say they're depressed, I always ask them a very standard set of questions. Do you have a job? If you don't have a job, you're really in trouble in our society. First of all, your biological rhythms tend to go off the rails right away because there's no reason to go to bed at any particular time and there's no reason to get up. And for many people, if they don't get up at the same time, they foul up the functioning of their circadian rhythms, and that's enough to make them depressed right off the bat, especially if they start napping during the afternoon.
I can attest to that because I remember there was a certain period in my life where I was not working. I did not have a structure of discipline in my life. I completely went to bed at whatever time, woke up at whatever time I wanted. And I noticed that internally I started to feel beat down. I didn't have energy throughout the day and constantly tired from doing absolutely nothing. So I guess, yeah, what he said here is absolutely right. You need some sort of structure in your life in order to avoid you from going down in a spiral of negativity. Because once you go down that spiral, coming back out of it takes some tremendous work. So starting off with a structure that imposes discipline is absolutely necessary.
They also don't have a purpose. People aren't good without a purpose. And this isn't hypothesizing. We absolutely understand the circuitry that underlies positive emotion. We know how it works. Almost all the positive emotion that any of you are likely to experience in your life will not be a consequence of attaining things. It will be a consequence of seeing that things are working as you proceed towards a goal you value. That's completely different. And you need to know this because people are often stunned, for example. They finish their PhD thesis and their presupposition is that they're going to be elated for a month. And often instead they're actually depressed. And they think, oh, what the hell? I've been working on this for 7 years and I handed it in and what do I do now? And that's what depresses them, right? It's the what do I do now? Well, they're fine if they enjoyed it, pursuing the thing. As long as it was working out, they get a lot of enthusiasm and excitement out of that because that's how our nervous systems work. Most of your positive emotion is goal pursuit emotion. If you take drugs like cocaine or amphetamine, the reason they're enjoyable is because they turn on the systems that help you pursue goals. That's why people like them. So if you don't have a job, you got no structure, that's not good. Plus, you tend not to have a point. So you're overwhelmed by chaotic lack of structure and you don't have any positive emotion. Well, do you have any friends? So sometimes you see people who are depressed, they have no job, they have no friends, they have.
And before we continue, I just want to mention that whatever I say here is not any sort of advice to anybody. I'm not a professional. I'll just be speaking from a standpoint where I've experienced certain things and sharing it with you people. So do not take anything to heart. Do not take it as a professional advice because that's not what it is.
No intimate relationship. They have an additional health problem and they have a drug and alcohol problem. My experience has been if you have 3 of those problems, it's almost impossible to help you. You're so deeply mired in chaos that you can't get out because you make progress on one front and one of your other problems pulls you down. So one of the things I tell people who are depressed is like, don't sacrifice your stability. Get a job, even if it's not the job you exactly want. Get a damn job. You need a job. Find some friends. Get out in the dating circuit. See if you can establish an intimate relationship. Put together some of the foundational items that are like pillars that your life rests on. Well, that's the practical thing to do. So that's one example with regards to depression.
How do your clients respond to the suggestions that they establish structure in their life as an antidote to depression?
Well, the thing is, you don't just launch it on them, you know. You got to negotiate with the person. And you also got to teach them to negotiate with themselves. And this is something that's very useful to know. You know, you can tyrannize yourself into doing things, but I wouldn't recommend it. What I would recommend instead is that you ask yourself what you're willing to do. It's a really effective technique. It's like a meditative technique. So, for example, you can get up in the morning and you can think, well, you know, I'd like to have a good day today, so I'd like to go to bed tonight without feeling guilty because I, you know, didn't do some things I said I was going to do, and I'd like to have kind of an interesting day. So you got to fulfill my responsibilities, and I want to, you know, enjoy the day. Then you can ask yourself, well, okay, what would I have to do in order for that to happen that I would do? And the probability, if you practice this for 3 or 4 days, is your brain will just tell you. It'll say, well, you know, there's that piece of homework that you haven't done for like 3 weeks. You should knock that sucker off because it would only take you 10 minutes and you've been avoiding it and torturing yourself to death for, you know, like 72 hours straight. And if you do that, here's a little interesting thing you can do. And, you know, maybe this is little obligations you should clean up. And so what you do in a situation like that is you teach the person to negotiate with themselves. Say, well, let's figure out what your aims are. You got to have some aims. Whatever they are. And they might say, well, I'm so depressed I don't have any aims. And then I say, well, pick the least objectionable of the aims and act it out for a while and see what happens. Because sometimes your emotional systems are so fouled up that you have to pretend, you have to act the thing out before you can start to believe it. I mean, people always assume they have to believe and then act, but sometimes that's true and lots of times it isn't. So the trick, if you're doing therapeutic work with somebody and you're helping them establish a structure, is to find out what they'll do. Now, if they want to get better, which is not a given, because there are often payoffs for not getting better. That's basically the payoffs of being a martyr, or maybe the payoffs of doing what your entirely pathological family members want you to do because they actually want you to fail. Assuming you want to get better, there's usually something you can figure out that would constitute a step towards some sort of concrete goal. And my presumption, it's a behavioral presumption fundamentally, is that small accruing gains that repeat are unbelievably powerful. So, you know, this is another thing to know about in your own life. It's something I learned in part from reading the writings of Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who's a great Russian philosopher and novelist. You know, he said, you can look at your life and you can see what isn't right about it. I mean, all you have to do is look. And then you can start to fix that. And the way you fix it is by noticing what you could in fact fix. You know, people are often trying to fix things they can't fix.
That is absolutely true. I'm talking from experience. Once again, as I mentioned earlier, there was a certain moment or a certain period of my life where I did not know where I was going. There was no structure involved at all. Probably due to reasons behind my control, or some of them could have been under my control, but I just chose to completely let go, and things went the way they went. But it is highly important, the point that is hammering in here, getting a structure or imposing upon yourself a structure of discipline. It is extremely important. Regardless if you feel like doing it or not, it is highly beneficial. It's the same as, a good example is, think of going to the gym, going for a workout. You're not highly motivated to go every single day, 24/7, 365, but you know that it is beneficial, so you have to do it regardless whether you like it or not, because you already know what happens if you do not do it. But then again, once you're in a spiral of negativity, a part of you becomes comfortable with it, that you start to identify with that depression, that's who you are, that's how life is going to go, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. And getting out of that is, once again, extremely hard. So you have to do the things that you do not want to do, because those are usually the things that you can control. So start taking control of certain aspects that you can control, and then start stepping up with the building blocks. Build the whole foundation first, and then the house comes afterwards.
Which I would not recommend, because if you try to fix something you can't fix, you'll just ruin it. Like, you can find all sorts of undergraduates who are perfectly willing to restructure the international economic system, who cannot keep their room clean. And there's actually a gap there, and it's surprising that people don't actually notice. So I would say, if you pay attention, you can see things that you could fix. They yell at you. They really do. We even know how that happens. Let me give you an example, because rooms are full of stories. And the stories have effects on you. So here's a classic experiment. So you take two groups of undergraduates, you bring them into your lab, and you give one group a multiple choice test that has a bunch of words in it that are associated with being old. And you give the other group the same multiple choice test, except the words are associated with being young. This is independent of the content of the test. It's just descriptions. And then you time the undergraduates as they walk back to the elevators. The ones who completed the multiple choice test that had more words associated with aging walk slower back to the elevators. And they don't know that. And they don't know they're doing it. And that study's been replicated in various forms many, many times. You're unbelievably sensitive to the story that your environment's telling you, because your environment is not made out of objects. That's just wrong. Your environment is basically made out of something like tools and obstacles. You're a tool-using creature. You're a tool-perceiving creature. The things you, like if I take you out of this room and I say, well, what was in the room? You're not going to say, random patterns in the carpet, because they're real. They're just as good an object as anything else. You're going to say chairs because you can sit on them, and you're going to say handrails because you can hold them. You're going to say stairs because you can walk down them. That's what you see, and that's what you interact with. And if you pay attention to your environment, which is you, by the way, extended, all of your experience is you. It will tell you all the time what you should do. All you have to do is do it. But then you have to decide if you want to do it. One of the things I've noticed about people, because I've wondered, once I started studying these mythological stories, and I got this idea about the fact that life can be meaningful enough to justify its suffering. I thought, God, that's such a good idea. Because it's not optimistic exactly. Some people will tell you, well, you can be happy. It's like, those people are idiots. I'm telling you, they're idiots. There's going to be things that come along that flatten you so hard you won't believe it. And you're not happy then. And so if life is to be happy, well, in those situations, what are you doing? Why even live? But life isn't to be happy. If you're happy, you're bloody fortunate, and you should enjoy it. You should, because it's the grace of God, so to speak. With regards to meaning, I thought, well, people know when they're doing something meaningful. They can tell, so why the hell don't they do meaningful things all the time? It seems obvious.
Just to add to that, life is definitely beautiful, and the suffering is justified, because it is an extreme adventure to have obstacles thrown at you, or obstacles arise within your mind that at a certain point you might think that I cannot overcome this, but the moment you set your mind to it, you light up a fire and the adventure starts. If you get yourself in that adventurous mode and continue on with the path and believe deep down that, you know what, this is all worth it, life is definitely worth it.
Yes, you could do it. I mean, it's hard, you know, because other people want you to do other things, and it's a struggle, but everything's a struggle. And then I thought, well, oh, I get it. I see why. It took me about 10 years to figure this out. People have a choice. Choice number one, nothing you do means anything. Well, that's kind of a drag, right? It's meaninglessness of life and all that, existential angst. You know, that's kind of a pain. But the upside of nothing that you do is meaningful is you don't have to do anything. You've got no responsibility. Now, you have to suffer because things are meaningless, but that's a small price to pay for being able to be completely useless. The alternative is everything you do matters. Really. If you make a mistake, it's a real mistake. If you betray someone, you tilt the world a little more sharply towards evil rather than good. It matters what you do. Well, if you buy that, then you can have a meaningful life.
That is true. That is absolutely true what he just mentioned there. If you behave in manners that are unacceptable, that create negative influence towards others, you are tilting the world towards the negative side of things, and you're doing humanity a disservice. It's highly essential that you strive to become the best version of yourself. Then the world will become a better place. As I always like to mention, we see the world and think that there could be so much change that could happen, but that change often starts with ourselves. We need to change ourselves to see the change that we want to see in the world, and that is, of course, changing ourselves to the better.
But there's no mucking around. It means responsibility. It means that the decisions you make are important. It means that when you do something wrong, it's wrong. Well, do you want that?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, once again, Jordan Peterson spitting facts. That's it for the video. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back.
Yeah, hey, Tony Franco, this wave.